that new privacy feature for Zoom is probably a good thing. They're recording in progress.
Yeah, it's very funny. And I'm sure you're the same way. I'm constantly on Zoom calls all day. If it's Microsoft Teams, if it's Google Meets. We at my other company, we actually only did Google Meets, and we disabled the record, so nobody could record anything. And then I switched over to Zoom because I pretty much wanted to record all the meetings. And I would say, hey, especially if they're short 15 or 20-minute meetings and you were having a strategy, it's a great way to go back and look at the notes if you have 6 or 7 people on the call. So I think Zoom's done a good job with that.
Yeah, so I see Zoom have introduced for paid accounts that if you record to the cloud, they also will transcribe your meeting for you, which is pretty good.
I didn't see that. Oh wow! And I have a paid account. That's great.
There's a Facebook group called Masters of Zoom, and it's run by a friend of mine who's a retired Ivy League professor. His name is Richard Zoltner.
Right.
He's a very clever guy. He's a great guy. I really like Richard. And he's making online courses about product design. That's his thing. Anyway, so he runs Masters of Zoom, and that was one of his posts this week.
I love that. That's a great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, he's a very good guy, and he's very interactive.
That's a huge. So we pay a
smart guy's
right
conservative.
Yeah, so I pay a company right now to transcribe all the YouTube. So for the business that I run, it's a doctor's office, but we pay a company, part of our website management, to transcribe all of our YouTube videos.
Right. Well, I also use Otterai.
Okay.
So Otterai, I got a paid account, but I think there's a free account, and that transcribes automatically for you using machine learning and AI. It's not perfect, but it would be 80 or 90%, so that you could go through with the sound on slow perhaps, and you'll be able to fix all the errors. So it depends on whether it's worth your time to listen to it again to get it 100%. But those two features, basically transcription's getting better.
That's great. I didn't realize that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, I use Otterai on my phone and on my laptop, and they talk to each other. So, I got the stuff on both.
Wow, that's great.
So I use Otterai sometimes, like if I'm, normally I would record it on my laptop, Otterai, just having a look at it here on my phone. But sometimes, depending on, maybe if I'm on a phone call or something, I might, like if I'm talking to one of the Google's tech people about Google Ads, then I'll probably tap Otterai on my phone while I'm talking to them on my phone. Is that, anyway, whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get, we were talking about this week 3 expansion document, and, there were a few points in here that sort of like made me sit up and take notice. The idea of creating your own thoughts, or thoughts just coming to you. Do you create your own thoughts, or is it all just inspired?
Yeah. I mean, I think as a culture, we've always believed that we create our thoughts. We have our ideas. And if I have a great idea, then I'm brilliant. But what Joshua teaches is that, well, actually, you become open to it. You become a vibrational match to a thought or an idea, and it is attracted to you. You attract it. And I think what they say, and I think I've read something similar in Deepak Chopra years ago, is that all thoughts exist in the field of potentiality, including the thoughts that have been thought, and they all exist still somewhere. And the thoughts that have yet to have been thought, they haven't been made concrete. And part of your contribution, if you like, to the universe or to source, to all that is to make that thought concrete, to attract that thought. So they're all kind of hovering out there to some extent, and you attract a thought as you become a vibrational match to it, and as you might have a requirement for it, which is interesting, because I've noticed that I have created a process that if something happens or I'm looking for an idea or inspiration, I kind of these days, even before I read this stuff, I sort of slip into a right, okay, let me think about that. Let me dwell on that. You know how people sleep on it or whatever, and they expect that the answer will come to them by the morning or whatever. So yeah, so to me, I kind of, without realizing it, started to open myself up so that these things would come to me. So it wasn't by effort, like, oh, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to do this? It's actually about, well, let that come to me and kind of chill out. And I guess that is having a positive vibration really, so that you attract the right kinds of thoughts that are going to get you what you want. Which takes us close to a topic that I think we touched a bit on last time, which is in here as well. Because I've heard people of a spiritual bent talking about kind of almost a laissez-faire or a fatalistic attitude of, I'll let the universe sort it out for me. And I thought, well, I kind of get that, but I don't think that's actually how it works. And in this week's material from the Ascension Experience, this is what segment 1 is in it, which is about alignment, and this week is about expansion. It talks about that you need to recognize whether the idea that's come to you is an urge out of fear or whether it's an inspiration out of love. And which can take a bit of practice to recognize which is which, but if it's an inspiration, then what will come up as a fear, and the fear is that, well, I don't know if I want to do that thing. And it's about overcoming that fear because you realize it's all in your mind. I got quite a lot more to say on that, but I'll stop for a moment and give me your thoughts on this.
That, it's funny, but it goes back to this. I think you and I started this conversation a couple of weeks ago. And, today in this weekly document, we talked a lot about taking action, right? This whole concept of taking action, and where I think my struggle is understanding the difference between forced action and inspired action. And if it feels right, but everything kind of feels right to me at times. It's like, if I don't want to do something and I have to do it, I have to force it because, you got to do it, then it gets done eventually. But the idea that you attract, I've heard, how many times have we heard great songwriters, right? Great musicians say, the song just came to me. I can't, right? I was just watching an interview with the guy from Coldplay, Chris, whatever his name is. Yeah. And he actually just had that whole thing. So this idea that it's all out there, and I just have to get on that vibrational match, and it'll come to me, and the inspired action will follow, right? Those steps will follow. I very much like that. I to your point, I'm a little struggling with the, I read to learn, right? I'm constantly out trying to self-development, to gain more knowledge, to do all that stuff. The idea that you don't have to do any of that, that you just have to sit back, I'm sure it's not black or white, right? There's got to be some sort of compromise in there.
It's about self-improvement, right? Yeah, because Joshua says, well, there is no such thing as self-improvement. It never has worked and it never will work. So when are you going to give up on it? And the idea of self-improvement is that I am flawed in some way, and if I fix that flaw, then things will be better. So that's one model, but the Joshua model is quite different. So just on that creativity thing, for a long time, I've been fascinated by the creative process. Like, how does a songwriter or an artist receive their inspiration? Like, how does that happen? And I didn't really know why I was so fascinated by it. And it's the association that you have drawn, which really interests me, which is, well, that's a really extreme and sometimes public example of people receiving inspiration. So what I was fascinated by, but I didn't realize, was the inspiration process, how artists receive inspiration. And once I got to understand that, then I can understand our process of receiving inspiration. And I remember watching the Elton John film that he made, what was part of recently. And one of the things that fascinated me was the songwriting process, how Bernie Taupin would, so Elton would come up with some music and Bernie would come up with some words. It was a great collaboration, but just the whole process amazed me. And ever since I was quite young, I've always been fascinated by the way that the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney, the way John Lennon and Paul McCartney could just turn out hit after hit after hit, like countless amazing songs that they actually came up with, those guys. And And the same with art, really. Like I've always been interested in how artist friends receive their ideas. And there's that quote, I think, from Michelangelo, which was something about the piece of marble that he could see the completed work in the marble. He just had to chip away the other bits to release it, or something like that. So, I got fascinated by that, and I realized, oh, actually, I'm interested in that creative process, because it's about how it was an entree for me to discover how I receive inspiration. And yeah, so back to the self-improvement part, when you've been doing all that self-improvement stuff all your life, and you've been in business like you and I have, it becomes quite difficult to let that go.
And maybe self-improvement's the wrong description. It is expansion, right? I mean, you and I are always, I like learning stuff. I like hearing new information. Maybe what we do isn't self-improvement, but it's just part of that a journey, on the expansion journey. Because if everything is always moving forward, and everything is even expanding, even when you don't do anything, even when you're in the negative, you're expanding. Maybe it's not self-improvement, it's just constant expansion. Again, we're just either sticking a ladder on that. I don't know, but I couldn't imagine myself not. I mean, books are there for a reason, right? I mean, it just.
Yeah. There's learning and discovery and expansion, and yeah, maybe. I mean, I have done a lot of, I guess, so-called self-improvement work, and making yourself do this and disciplining that and forming habits and all that kind of carry on. But I got to a certain age, and it's like, man, I can't be bothered with making myself do stuff and having a disciplined day and all the rest of it. It's like, I'm enjoying, actually, to hell with it, I'm just going to do what I feel like right now. And I don't feel like doing that task that's in front of me, and I'm not going to do it. But what I discovered is that I've started reframing those tasks, and later on that day or the next day, I will actually feel inspired to do it, to feel energized to do it. Yeah.
You had said it actually last time, and I actually used that this week, because it wasn't actually until I think yesterday about halfway through the day, I was finally getting the energy and the focus to actually get some stuff done. And I was excited. There was a project I was working on for 2 weeks that I couldn't get anywhere on it. And I finally just completed it, knocked it out. And I was like, this is easy, just reframe it. Stop this. I know it's tedious, but I'm like, it'll be fun. You'll get to know all the different names. You'll get and I was able to knock it out. But I did take your advice from last week, and I did reframe it, and it absolutely did help. And I agree with you. I think that the whole habit thing, the whole beating yourself up, the whole to be rigid on the self-improvement is one thing, but knowledge or skill, or increasing your skills or increasing your knowledge on something, to jam that into a template of, self-improvement, that there's something wrong with you. It's more about, well, I'd like to learn about that. I'd like to learn how to do that. That seems like fun. Right. So maybe it is what you and I are doing isn't really self-improvement anymore. Maybe this is just expansion. We want to expand our skill sets. We want to expand our knowledge.
Yeah.
I want to see all the different cool things that we can do together. Right. And who knows? But it's all lumped together, and you're right. And that's a tough thing for me to hear, that self-improvement is a waste of time.
Yeah. Like, I still think it's a really good idea, if you feel inspired to, which I do mostly, to be fit and to look after your health, because it makes the journey far more pleasant. And you can actually, like, it does seem, I know the energy comes from without, and you feel tired and lacking in energy when you're resisting. But I notice when I'm fitter and more active, that I'm more energized and I feel better. Yeah. I mean, certain things tend to raise my mood or my help with alignment, and exercise, doing like something vigorous, it doesn't have to be long, but even some short cardio or whatever, I tend to feel a lot better, even if it's a chore outside or walking up a steep hill or something. And also notice that, like, drinking alcohol, I find the next day that it's harder to stay in alignment, and I tend to move away. I have to be far more conscious and deliberate about staying in a positive frame of mind. And I tend to do less of that because, and I've heard Gary mention that too, to somebody, that it affects your alignment. So I find it's good to be aware, getting a reasonable amount of sleep, even though Joshua says we mostly need sleep because of resistance, that if we had less resistance, then we would need less sleep, which is kind of interesting as well. So, yeah, I was looking through the notes from this week, and I'm keeping talking here because I think maybe it's your internet. I hope it's not mine. You're frozen for a minute. So, okay, he'll come back in a second, I am sure. So here he is. Yeah, so week 3 of the Ascension experience of the first month. Yeah, here he is. Good. Is all about expansion, which is what we're talking about. And then one of the things I highlighted is you're living a far more expanded life this time around than you have ever lived before. There is no regression. All life is moving forward into the unknown, which is kind of interesting as well. And I guess that fits with what most people think about when it comes to being in the physical and choosing to come back or not, that it's a progression. Another thing I highlighted, it says, if you have areas in your life that are not working, you will know that you have created the momentum of fear. And in these areas, you see yourself from a limited perspective. So we started talking about receiving an inspiration, feeling fear, and then do you go forward? And they give some examples of that. And maybe you don't see yourself as worthy of love, abundance, creativity, or success. You've not created the confidence that allows you to push past fear when you receive an inspired idea, because you have some limiting beliefs in those areas. So they give us an example of, let's say you want to meet a romantic partner and you're at a party and you see somebody that you think you would like to go and talk to. So the inspiration is, you feel some interest or a spark with that person and you're inspired to go and see them. And then all those fears rush in, which is like, what if they're not interested? Which is basically a fear of rejection. I mean, how can that really hurt you apart from the idea? What if they don't like me? What if they're not interested? What if they've already got a partner? And, there's 101 reasons. And years ago, I used to be in sales, and I realized that what sales trainers used to call reluctance, which was not wanting to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, really was about that kind of fear. And like this, I'm thinking at the moment, there are a few people I could ring for some business opportunities. There's some people I can't get a hold of this person any other way than by ringing their office. And I kind of nudge it forward each time, the reminder, I keep putting it forward one day. And when I read this about the romantic partner at a party idea, I thought, you know what? Why am I actually reluctant to ring that person? Like, the worst that can happen is the current situation, which is they don't know who I am and they're not doing any business with us. So that, they're not doing any business now. So the worst that can happen is they still won't be doing any business, and that's not the end of the world. So what is it? It's a fear of rejection and not feeling confident, So they say here, you're not created the confidence that will allow you to push past fear when you receive an inspired idea, because there's some limiting beliefs in those areas. So, I mean, based on what I know about this particular business, we've helped them a lot in the past, and there's new people now in some of those departments. So I haven't spoken to them for a few years. And unless something dramatic has changed there, which I don't think it has, if they only knew what we could do to help them and grow their business, they would be interested. And so I ask myself every day, why did I push that reminder forward rather than actually ringing that person? And it's the same as the thing at the party, or the old call reluctance, as they used to maybe still call it in sales. And so that's been very interesting for me. It's like, there is some fear there. And also I know that to grow parts of my business, I really need to put myself out there more. I need to make some more videos, and I need to really, do some Facebook Lives and start to write regular emails, build a list, build a bigger list, all that sort of stuff, which means that I have to have really good ideas of things that people will be interested in. And I actually have to put myself out there. Why am I scared of that? Well, what if I did it and it didn't work? and oh my God, I would have failed, and people might even see that I tried and failed. Like, oh no, I can't have that. And so when I actually rationalize those fears, like I know that to do some of those things, like to share ideas with people on video or email or podcast or whatever, I know that's in many ways I would enjoy that, but I'm also fearful of it, and I think it's the fear of rejection and failure, which is just an idea, right? Because if you're not doing it now and you try it and you're back to where you were before, I mean, you didn't lose anything really because you never had it to start with.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I like that part you had just read. And the thing that really, and I highlighted, it's funny, we were highlighting almost the same parts, right? Is the way you push past fears to release the attachment to a specific outcome. Now, this to me was super interesting, right? Because you and I are, as a business person, you have a specific outcome in your mind, right? So do I, right? You want this. So the fear is all based upon, tied to that outcome that we've created in our mind, right? Whatever that may be. And if you remove that outcome, if you just say, I had to do this project, I'm just getting the project out. I didn't have the outcome wasn't attached of all the things that were associated with getting those, whatever there was, those 30 letters out. I didn't care anymore. I just said, hey, I'm just going to get it out. I'm going to say the project is done, and whatever happens with it, happens with it. And it got me to get them done. I just, instead of saying, hey, everybody's going to have to respond, I have to get an order for every one of these letters. All those different things that you and I would, as a business, right, would attach to that action. That helped me tremendously. And that was in here in that note. And I love the way they said that this is what you call a transactional life. I lived my whole life that way. It's crazy, right? But I literally lived everything that way. I would do X to get Y.
Yeah, I'm actually very glad you were just looking for here. Here's that thing. I just wrote that down when you were saying it, that for example, when I go to call that business, I read that thing, I'd forgotten it. I think I highlighted it, and I'm glad you mentioned it, that have no attachment to the outcome. And it's also true that when you start talking to people about business opportunities, sometimes the opportunity isn't what you thought it was anyway. Like something completely different might happen, that you discover something about them or their business that you didn't know. And it's like, well, I can really help you with that. Or they say, that's not for me right now, but you know what, my friend so-and-so really needs this that you're talking about. Like you actually have no idea where it's going to go, right? And Joshua often says that is like, you see this narrow tunnel thing, but actually, and you think about the way business opportunities occur, most of them are branches off the trunk that you thought it was going to go here, but actually it went off here and a new amazing thing happened.
Yeah. And the other thing too is right above that section, they said, if you want to be a millionaire, maybe you'll be inspired to read a book. And this goes back to the self-improvement thing that we were talking about before, where self-improvement, and I think it's almost, and maybe this is where it's like a category you and I can kind of we can actually redefine this category, where the idea of self-improvement, and I understand what Josh was saying, that you have a deficit that you need to improve and you're perfect in every way. I fully understand and appreciate that aspect, but we also have a desire for expansion. We also have a desire for learning, to learn new skills, to have fun, to see what those new skills can add to our life, right? Where I'm perfect now and I'm enjoying it, but there's so much more fun we can actually continue to have and expand through this acquisition of knowledge, and of different types of knowledge.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to, and I'm going to ask Joshua the question, I think tomorrow on our call, right? I want to ask him that question, but what do you think about that? I mean, two guys that we've spent our whole lives doing self-improvement in some various form. What is the correct way to describe it as in this context?
Well, yeah, I think acquiring ideas, information, and knowledge, especially if you feel inspired, I think that's a great thing. And you're talking about expansion. I think the comment that Joshua has about it is, if you start from the position that I in some way have a deficit, or I am in some way flawed, I am in some way other than perfect, and if I fix that thing, then everything will be good. They say that part is a fallacy. They say, if you look back, you will see that has never worked and it never will work. So I actually get that. But that's not to say that you don't want to learn new things. So what they do is kind of, I guess, reframe that thing or recast it, as you say, by looking at the concept of expansion. And they say that everything is expanding all the time. The universe is expanding. And even if you do nothing, you are still expanding, and the universe is expanding. It's always fascinated me as an aside, and I did comment about this much to Joshua, how the Big Bang theory of the origin of the universe seems very similar to the way Joshua describes the concept of how the physical happened, where Source had a thought and the thought expanded and that became physical reality. And it's also quite similar to, for example, the indigenous creation myth of the indigenous people of New Zealand, the Maori people. Their creation myth, it's a wonderful story about the creation of light and all the rest of it. And it seems to me that, anyway, it's not coincidence that the Big Bang, the way Joshua describes how the physical arrived, and the Maori creation story, they all have a similarity to me, which was expansion. It's expansion.
Yeah. And if you've ever read Joseph Campbell, he is, I think you and I talked about it this one time too, a couple weeks back, where he's gone back and looked at all of these ritual, traditional, folklore, ideas all around creation. Like went back as 5,000 years, and he went to all the different parts of the world, and they all, to your point, exactly what you just said, they all had a similar theme. They all had a theme that, and depending on the cultures, were so far apart that there was no way that theme could have been brought together by the cultures. It was something else stringing it all together, right? Which is a pretty powerful, right? What is that? And to your point,
there is
one source.
It's the human experience, right? The human condition, right? Yeah. I studied when I was a teenager. I studied at universities social anthropology, and part of that was to look at mythology of different cultures and religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs of different cultures around the world. And I think one of the things they talked about was unity and diversity, which was exactly the point you make, that on the surface, all of these cultures are profoundly different, but there was so much commonality or unity in how things and how things actually unfolded in terms of mythology and religious or spiritual beliefs. Hey, I don't know why this thing just popped into my head, but my partner Trace used to work at a university, and her colleague raised a lot of money for research, millions of dollars for it, and for creating scientific projects and all that kind of stuff. And there's this guy at this university, University of Otago in New Zealand, and he's a scientist, and he's working with this scientist who I think is in the States, and they've got this absolute zero laboratory, or laboratory, as you might say, and so they get down to 0 degrees Kelvin, right, which is minus whatever it is that minus 400 and something degrees, anyway, whatever it is. They get down to absolute zero, where there's almost no movement in particles at all. And they've constructed this experiment where if they get a particle in Dunedin in New Zealand to do a particular thing, a matching particle on the other side of the world will do the same thing as well. So right across the world, there is this kind of, everyone talks about, the beam me up Scotty, and telepathy and all the rest of it. And so I found that mind blowing, that, and I think they're interested in it for, I think it's to do with storage, like information storage. I think that's the application that these guys are working on, and maybe transferring information. Anyway, I've only got a bit of that story. Trace can tell that story. Yeah,
that's a great story. It's no different than it's very similar to the double split theory, right? Which where electrons and protons are, unless you're looking at them, they will act a certain way, and then when you look at them, they will act in a completely different way.
Wow.
It's but it's funny you say this. So the idea of unity, the idea of all of us, and this is almost what's going on, across, you and I are in two different countries across the world from each other, yet we have so much in common in even if we have different cultures and different aspects and different conditions, right? And that's really what it comes down to. It's these different conditions that people let those conditions drive them, and drive that that a wedge between that unity that we all have together. You can sense it. There are people that you talk to. I mean, the first few times we talked, I didn't even know you were in New Zealand. I mean, there was no distance between, we're 8,000 miles apart, oceans apart. And I didn't feel, right. I was, we both, I think, had a common understanding of this. I think what Joshua was teaching, and how do we apply it to our lives, and how do we continue to apply it, and what can we do with it, and how do we share it with other people, right? Fun stuff. And yet we're oceans apart, and we still have this unity, this thin line of connection. And I think we all have it with people. And especially in America now, when you turn on the news, you turn on something aspect, every condition out there, every person out there is doing everything they can to break that little string of unity. It's to use those conditions, outside conditions, to break that unity. And it's so interesting to me that, and there are absolutely conditions that are horrific, and I'm not, I understand everybody's in different circumstances and different conditions, but if you remove those conditions for just a split second, we all have everything in common.
Yeah.
Right. And it's especially in America now, and I don't watch the news anymore, and I don't do any of that. It's so tough. You pick up your phone, you look at Twitter, you look at Instagram, whatever it may be. The only thing you see is somebody driving a wedge in that unity. Somebody got something for free. You deserve more. You're being held back. You're the victim. You need more of it, right? It's all of this storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's gotten to the point where it's, if you look at ritual storytelling that goes back, mythology that goes back, 5,000 years, about how, gods would create things. Our storytelling now is how, we're all victims. We're all victims.
Yeah. I think mass media often plays on victim and or fear thinking, and it's kind of almost a race to the bottom in terms of people's vibration. It's like we want to be spiraling upwards with our vibration, and with that stuff, it's like the whirlpool sucking you down instead. And I actually haven't really watched like TV of any kind for decades. Like back in the mid-90s, one day my wife, who's since passed away, Sandy, said, I gave the television to my youngest daughter, Kirsten. And I said, when did you do that? She said, 2 weeks ago. And I hadn't even noticed. I said, okay, awesome. That's fine. No problem.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So we got this box thing when we moved into this, when we came back after COVID, with COVID, came back to New Zealand, we got this box thing to connect. We bought a big screen to watch Netflix and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, whatever, movies. And we got this box that we can connect to the TV channels, but we might have used it like, I think we watched some of the America's Cup races, which were in Auckland, New Zealand recently. That was amazing to watch on free TV, but I never think to watch the news. I actually found this app on my phone yesterday for Radio New Zealand, which is kind of like the government broadcaster, like the BBC in Britain or ABC in Australia or whatever. Anyway, and I started listening to the beginning of it, and I thought, I actually can't do this. So stop, swipe, get rid of that app. Not get rid of the app, but close it down. It's like, I follow news headlines on my phone. I do read that stuff, but I am very aware that it is about fear and victimhood, and it is about, there's too much of that kind of stuff. You're talking about the unity thing. My impression is that most or many spiritual leaders over the millennia have really often had that concept of that we are all one, we're all connected. And, in the Bible, they talk about, there's some quote which along the lines of where Jesus might have said, what you do to the least of whatever, blah, 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 you do unto me. In other words, you might think that person deserves to be dealt to, but you're actually doing it to me and to yourself and everyone else as well, because we're all one, which is, there's 3 or 4 Bible quotes I like, and that's one of them. The other ones are about judge not lest you be judged, and let he or she who is without sin cast the first stone. It's like, that's kind of contemporary thinking, and the stuff that we're doing is like, everything's perfect. And if you might think somebody else isn't, but Jesus in the Bible was saying, well, actually, in my eyes, Mary Magdalene, whoever, was perfect. And you might judge people and, it might offend your moral code, but Jesus was preaching that thing of love everybody equally and we're all one, as I see it anyway.
No, I agree with you. And I grew up in a Catholic household with a father who's very religious. I am not religious. I'm very spiritual. But I agree with you 100%. There is this, it's the more I look, and I have 2 young kids, and I know your kids are older and out, but especially social media today, it's all about criticism. It's all about driving a wedge in that unity. Like when you and I mean, we don't set an agenda. We have this thing, it's a Thursday or a Friday morning for you, and we set up a call and we just go on and we talk, and we have just so much in common. We don't, I mean, there isn't any silence. We don't have a 30-year history together, right? But there's a unity that naturally that we just gravitate to. And I look at my kids and I look at what their senses are onslaught with, and it's constant criticism. It's constant complaining. It's everything you just described, the opposite of all the Bible verses you just said you liked. It's the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
My daughter went to a movie last night for the first time, and she came home and she was telling me how bad, and I'm like, did you enjoy yourself? Like, I said, you were just there to go have fun. Like, why are you criticizing the movie? And that's what everybody that put the review up, they could have done this better, they could have done that. I'm like, just enjoy it. But
yeah, I think people lose that sense. It's the same when you go out for a meal, especially if it's an expensive one. That I do a lot of expensive dining and 3-star dining in France and all that sort of stuff. And, I lost the joy of it all, to be honest. And now we tend to cook at home mostly now because I can make exactly what I want. And it's all about the joy of it, really, of the creation, some of the ingredient stuff that we grew, that kind of thing. And, receive the inspiration of an idea, make it up as you go along and serve up something delicious. Just by coincidence, if there was such a thing, I had a Catholic upbringing as well. And I'm not religious now. I don't go to church or anything like that, but I was a Catholic altar boy and quite into the whole thing. And strangely, the other day, a guy came along. We've got this feijoa orchard, and when there's a lot of feijoas at this time of year in autumn, fall.
What's a feijoa?
It's a fruit. It's Latin American fruit. Anyway,
okay.
They're quite big in New Zealand, and in Latin America, they wouldn't be saying it the way I said it, right? Because it's like Feijoa.
Gotcha. Okay.
But nobody in New Zealand speaks any Spanish, so we just, mangle the word. So when there's a lot of them, we let people cut from the village come and pick some and leave a gold coin, like a $1 or $2 for the school as a donation. Anyway, so this car pulled up. I was in the paddock moving some firewood, and this guy gets out of the car and he said, are the feijoas, can I get some feijoas this year? And he introduced himself, right? And he said, my name is Jeff Gray. I'm the parish priest here in Akaroa. And I immediately said, hello, Father, I'm Rob Turner. And he said, spoken like a Catholic, because, your Catholic conditioning, if he's a priest, you've got to call him Father. I said, yeah, I am a Catholic. Oh, no, I was a Catholic. I had a Catholic upbringing. Anyway, turns out he's a really good guy, and we've become friends, which is great. He came up for a cup of tea, and next time we gave him some limes for a gin and tonic, so he's going to come up for a gin one night. But it was interesting to me. It's like I've had these Catholic themes come to me. I haven't thought about the Catholic Church in years, and I'm not interested in getting back into it. But I think what's happening is I'm understanding how that shaped my interest in spirituality and how much of that I carry with me without even realizing it, how easily I slip into that, immediately calling him Father and all that, the protocols and so on. And what that made me realize is when I talk to him about stuff, it's like, that is such a big part of my identity.
There's also and I think what really, why I walked away from the church, not that I walked away from the church, I just stopped. I had so much guilt. I just felt I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy. I'm like, there's no way I can, God is just going to punish me, put me to hell. I am not a good human being, right? You're made to feel that way as you grow up, any kind of mistake you make. So I just, in my 20s, living in New York City, I just rebelled and said, I'm done. It is what it is. I think I always believed to be good to people, and I was never trying to take advantage of people. But, I did like money, and I did like success, and I did like, carousing around and doing stuff. And I'm like, I broke, 6 of the 10 commandments before lunch. And I'm like, how do I do this? So, but now that I, especially after Joshua, I think I could go back and appreciate it for what it was at the time, which was an introduction, right, to something spiritual and something, beautiful. And if you peel away all of those layers of guilt, those layers of shame, those layers of obedience, right? If you look at what Joshua says and how you raise kids, I mean, I've thought a lot about some of his teachings. It's no different than the way a priest would interact with his flock, right? You're all perfect. You're going to do what you're going to do, and I'm going to love you no matter what. There's a movie called, I think it's called The Homefront, or The House, or the Cabin in the Woods. I forget what it is, and it's got and it's about a family who loses their little daughter, right, to a horrible act, and the father, the kids go away, and the wife goes away, and the father, gets what he believes is a note from the person who did a horrible thing to his daughter and killed his 5-year-old daughter, and he goes to meet the guy, Cabin in the Woods, and it's really, he falls, and you don't know what you don't know what happened. He falls, and all of a sudden this whole scene unfolds, but he's theoretically talking to God, right? He's having these conversations, and he says, talks about punishment. You got to punish people. You got to do all this kind of stuff. And he's like, that's just religion. People interpreting what I had said religion was. He's like, I don't ever want to punish anybody. He's like, everybody's perfect. And it was like, I watched that, and I was like, holy cow, because it really was something that Joshua was saying. And this movie's probably 5 or 6 years old. But I was like, whoa. And he's like, I can't. He's like, I'm not here to punish anybody. He's like, I'm not. He's like, you're not supposed to do anything. And I'm like, you're not supposed to do anything. I'm like, all of these things, really, these little sayings came back, and because I just watched it a few weeks ago, and I was like, it was very powerful for me. It hit home. It was the first time I'd seen a religious themed movie talk in a general term, right, of just love, and it's all okay, and you're not going to be punished. You're not going to hell. You're not going to heaven. We just re-click. It restarts at some point.
Yeah. I guess that was one of the things that got me about the church, is that it seemed that there was a lot of arbitrary and human created rules that became, in all the formality and all the rest of it. And my uncle, who he died recently, but he would be like 93 or something if he was alive now, 94. And he was a very devout Catholic. He even had like a papal knighthood. The Pope had, given him a Catholic knighthood for his contribution to various things to do. He was British, he was English. Anyway, but he experienced Catholicism in a truly spiritual way. It was an eye-opener for me to talk to him about the way that he felt that God acted in his life. And to me, it was like, okay, you actually experienced this in a spiritual way, as what I would call it, rather than a dogmatic or, yeah. So that was interesting. He was an exceptional guy. He was a mathematical genius. I don't know if you've ever seen any of those movies like The Imitation Game, about.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Right. So Alan Turing was his maths professor.
That's awesome.
And then he worked with Alan Turing at GCHQ, cracking codes in the Cold War. So
wow.
And he would tell me stories about Turing, he said he actually was a very good runner and nearly qualified for the Olympics one time. But he said by the time I knew him, he was a kind of a shambling figure with a piece of string holding up his trousers. So anyway, he said, so I found all these movies a bit difficult, having known Alan Turing, quite well, like as his maths professor and also as working with him at GCHQ. Anyway, so he's kind of from another realm anyway, being this mathematical genius. But it was, he was a very practical, down-to-earth man from a working class background, and he genuinely didn't see anybody as better or worse than anyone else. Like he would describe the poorest, person in the same way as the most famous person he had met. He would talk about everybody evenly. And so it was very interesting for me, very instructional. I felt very close to him. And we shared the same name, which helped, with her grandfather and various others in the family. and he was Robert. So anyway, very interesting for me that to see someone who could experience a traditional religion in a spiritual way. Hey, there's a couple other things going back to our document. What you want, the fulfillment of your desire, lies on the other side of fear. So this is about taking action, right? Is that the fulfillment of the thing you want, whether it's a romantic partner or more financial abundance or whatever it might be, better health, it's on the other side of fear. And so I think it's really important to understand you receive an inspiration, you have a desire, which is, a desire which is aligned with your true purpose or whatever you want to call it. But even to actually manifest that desire, there is still fear, which is why I was talking about the example of meeting a romantic partner at a party or picking up the phone to talk to somebody and, approaching somebody in business with the prospect that they might reject you. And those limiting beliefs must be overcome through action. Once the action is taken, you will expand. And if you choose to push past fear, you will expand through that experience. If you would like to experience expansion in the way you prefer, that will lead to the manifestation of all your desires. You must expand by taking action when inspired. To feel better, you must expand through fear to greater levels of love and clarity. So I like this particular segment because it's actually about some practical things like what's holding me back from taking my business to the next level. And really, I've come to understand it's just fear of, and it's completely imaginary stuff. And even if, what am I scared of? Failure and rejection, blah, blah. And if that happens, so what? Even if people know that I tried and it didn't work, so what?
Yeah, this was the first time and I did the boot camp. So it's been, been 12 weeks of doing stuff with Joshua that he actually mentions, that you have to, you can get past it. You can get past fear by taking action, right? Inspired action was always something we talked about. I do like this a lot, and I just think I've taken in my life, I've taken so much forced action that I'm now at a point where I almost taking no action is the thing I choose to do if there's a choice. But when I sit down and I think, there are hundreds of ideas that come to into my mind, right? That come about for whatever I'm doing, and picking and choosing which action to take, that seems to be like that's the big question I keep asking myself, like, do I do this or do I do that? And just saying which one feels better at times, I that is just a reoccurring question, and I know what the answer is. It's the one that feels good, right? I don't know how to discern the two between the two or the three or the four things that are, because if they're all coming to me, aren't they all inspired? Theoretically, right? So I love this part, and it's gotten me thinking a lot about what actions to take. And I think just to bring it full circle, is the only action to take is an action with no outcome attachment to the outcome. And if I take that action, then I think things will work out.
Yeah, I think that is a key insight that you've mentioned a couple of times now, that take the action with no attachment to the outcome.
Right.
And that's really the thing. It's like, I have no idea what's going to happen when I bring this company, this person, and whatever happens is just fine.
It sort of gives me clarity on because it's tough to do. I measure everything, right? I don't know, and I don't mean to, but I'm sure you do too, right? There's we have, okay, I'm doing this. Is this helping my business? Is this helping me? How is it? I'm for work. I mean, I spend 80% of my time trying to understand and measure the actions we're taking. Like, are they working? Is the strategy right? So it's, measuring based upon an outcome is such a daily part of my life. And to try to, export myself out of that when it comes to what I'm doing, that's really where I'm where I think where the opportunity for me for true expansion is for me to step into that fully and be, hey, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that to me is huge. You know, I wrote down this thing. It's like, you know, race to the bottom. And it goes back to, you know, what we were talking about before, but it really is, that sums up society.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
the
you
like
said
common
that.
denominator thing, right?
It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah,
And
it
it's,
is a vibrational spiral to the bottom, I think, if you
it
get
really,
sucked into the news. And the more trashy the newspapers are, the news services, the more they kind of go with that whole fear and victim thing. And you read an article and you're meant to be outraged. I can't believe that person did that. That is just so wrong. That's terrible. And it's like, well, did this happen to you? Does it affect you? No, no, no. Well, do you really care about it? Why do you care about it? Because you're putting yourself in the shoes of the victim here, and you're basically wanting to intensely experience a victim moment. And what does that do to your vibration and your alignment?
holy
Like, not where I
cow.
want to go.
And I think, you know, for the past, you know, almost week and a half now, since I've been somewhat not, you know, a little sick, not feeling well. So I've spent a little bit more time, you know, I'm tired, right? So I'm going to lie down, and I would scroll through maybe Twitter or something or Instagram in a way I hadn't before. And I could feel myself being drained. Like, even I couldn't get into a happy place. I couldn't get into a good place. It's amazing. So then I wasn't
Yeah.
feeling well. I'm doing all the things that I shouldn't be doing, but I couldn't. I tried to meditate and I just couldn't focus. I mean, my mind was mush. I tried to do some of the exercises that we were doing in the morning, and I literally couldn't focus. I could not keep it.
Yeah.
But I could sit down and watch Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Look at Twitter for 15, 20 minutes, and it's all bad. You know, whatever your side you're on, it's all just bad.
Well, I actually go to Reddit these days when I want something like that, because there are some really cool threads in Reddit. And whatever
Yeah.
your interest is, like, I'm interested in astronomy and astrophotography. I'm interested in bread making. You know, I make sourdough bread. I'm kind of interested in cheese making. I'm interested in search engine optimization. And there's all these threads on these very cool things. There's really amazing geology threads where people, you know, take photos of these incredible places, and that's kind of a celebration thing. So whatever your interest is, you can get into all the negative stuff, and Reddit's full of that as well, like every other channel. But it's actually got all these amazing communities where you can just, you know, you can save them as favorites, and you can just scroll through, and it'll give you a selection of the latest comments, posts on those particular topics. And, you know, I'm interested in airplanes as well. So, you know, I see aviation stuff in cars and motorbikes, and I'm interested in native plants and our native language. And so I follow all these very cool things, and people are sharing and celebrating their interest. So to me, that's a kind of a social channel where you actually can filter in or filter out the stuff you do and don't want. And so when I'm, you know, feeling in one of those moods, it's like I can't even be bothered reading a thriller or something, you know, light. Then I just scroll through my favorites on Reddit, and I find that that's pretty cool, and it's actually uplifting and aligning. So that's why I like that.
I like that. That's good advice. I have read it. I have not done much with it, but I do have to get off Twitter. I'm like, it's holy cow. And I just do it for 10 minutes a day. I'm like, but I mean, you just go to the trending. It's literally the devil has come over to take over the world. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about or where you are, but there's something terrible everywhere.
I mostly use Twitter if I want to follow a trending event and I haven't got the information on it, just by picking the hashtags and then searching the hashtags. So, but I mean, I like Twitter, but I hardly ever look at it. I look at Facebook all the time for work, you know, because we do a lot of Facebook promotions. But, you know, I tell you, I had a minor manifestation event the other day with Facebook, because I took some photos and I put them up on various pages, including some of our own pages and some photography groups and so on. And then I realized I had this great attachment to, like, oh, I hope I get heaps of likes. And I thought,
wow,
I'm doing this for people's approval. So I wrote that up as a manifestation event, like, what's my limiting belief? So that was kind of interesting. I laughed at myself. I thought, what if you posted that without any expectation of the outcome? Because you thought it was a beautiful photo and you hope other people might enjoy it as well, as opposed to, I hope a lot of people like my photo.
That's funny.
I Instagrammed it as well. And the other day I turned back on the Instagram, now giving you a choice where you can say, I want to see my likes, or I don't want to see my number of likes.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't pay attention to it's funny. I run a few different little Instagram pages for my family or for this nonprofit I run. And I don't ever really look at the likes. Like I just, when I post it, it's more, I look at the posts very much as, hey, informational. Like, hey, I just want people to see that this is going on, and then they can.
Yeah.
And but I did actually have. It's funny. I had a manifestation event myself at the end of last week that I wanted to go in a direction with this contract in the business that I was running, and I spoke to the owner and the CFO, and I said, hey, listen, this is what we should be doing. Really, an area that I'm an expert in, and I felt, and they went in a completely different direction, which honestly was fair. It's no real sweat off my back. It's we're not costing us any more money, really. And I found myself wanting, and I did not, but wanting to tell them how wrong they were. And
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Why do I care? And I had to really get. Then I'm like, what's my limiting belief? Well, I'm not smart enough, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not significant. You look at somebody's successful. Well, if somebody's really successful, whatever they say, everyone's got to follow. I must not be smart or successful. I'm like, well, everyone's got their own opinion. It's like easy, but I did. It was like, and I got worked up over it, and I wanted to make a phone call. We gotta have a team meeting. But I did. I had this. I felt, and I'm like, wow. And then I finally, it all just, I kind of went through it in my mind, the manifestation event process. I started doing the form, and then I felt better afterwards. After I processed it, I'm like, yeah. But it's funny when they pop up like that. I now look at, which is the amazing thing which Joshua does. I look at life so much differently now when that emotion, it's really an emotional trigger. This manifestation event is an emotional trigger. Really, that's what it is, right? Your emotions are triggered. And I look at those as such gifts now. Like, okay, wow, what am I supposed to learn from this?
Yeah, the emotional guidance
versus
system.
How do I defend myself? Yeah, emotional guidance system. That's exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great concept that if you feel a negative emotion, it means you've got a limiting belief. If you're feeling a positive emotion, it means you've got an empowering belief. And and notice what your emotional system is, because I mean, there are so many models as to what emotions are, but I really like this one, that if I'm feeling a negative emotion, it's telling me that I'm out of alignment and I have a limiting belief. If I'm feeling a positive emotion, it means I'm in alignment and enjoy it. I do like the fact that I have fewer fixed opinions now after having done 2 years of this work, the Joshua work, that most things that most people think that previously I disagreed with, it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting that you think that. I don't really think that, but you're not me, so why would we think the same? We don't. And that's cool. And it's no skin off my back. No skin off my back if you have a different viewpoint, because there is no right and wrong. There are the limiting or empowering beliefs, and that's it.
That's huge, right? Just getting that concept. I'm leaning into that.
Yeah.
A little bit. And in America, obviously, politics is everywhere. COVID is everywhere. COVID is all over the world. But it's the vaccine, right? All these different things are out there, and it's one side or the other. There is no listening. There is no communication.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm able to talk to people, and they say, hey, I love Biden, or I love Trump, or I'm going to get vaccinated, or I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm like, cool. I'm like, hey, great. Like I've gotten to a point where I no more, I don't react. I'm like, hey, whatever, I'm like, it's all good.
I think politicians and vaccines and all the stuff around that are really good practice examples, really good examples to detach from having fixed right and wrong opinions around these things. And because it's easy to actually really like or dislike a particular politician. And, Trump was very polarizing in that way, that half the people thought he was wonderful and half thought he was terrible. And then just think he was terrible. They really, really thought he was terrible. And I practice it because I don't really like our prime minister. She's, famous in a small way, but, and she's got some amazing qualities. But the things that matter to me, like running the economy, she has no idea whatsoever. But I've been practicing is because, like, well, this is a good thing to practice on. It's like, I don't know anything about it personally, so I can't say whether I like or dislike her personally. I just wouldn't run the economy the way that she is wanting to run it. But does it make any difference to me? No. And does it affect my life? Well, actually, I have to say it doesn't. So why would that matter to me, to actually have a fixed opinion and to really care about it and to have a strong feeling, for or against such a person? And so it's been really good. I found it's very liberating because all sorts of things that might have fired me up before, it doesn't matter to me at all. Like the other day, there was this crazy thing happened when I was driving, and we drive on the left, and there was this guy here, and he decided he wanted to turn left right in front of me, so he just got to reverse it for you. And so basically, I don't think he knew I was there. He just kind of swooped right across in front of me and went down this road. And somebody behind me was so incensed that they were sitting on their horn, honk, honk. And I actually didn't have to suppress any feeling. I just didn't have a feeling. It's like, oh, okay, that happened. I slowed down. I kind of wondered where he was going to go. I had a sixth sense that it might happen, and I just slowed down, let it happen, and carried on. I thought, well, that was interesting, and that was it. And I thought, how interesting, because in the past I would have been mad as hell, and the police need to get a hold of that guy. But I really didn't give a shit.
What's so funny you say road rage. I was actually traveling to Beverly Hills a couple of weeks ago, and for work, and there was a little bit of an accident, and I was literally in stop traffic going between Arizona and Los Angeles for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
And I had an audiobook. I put it in. I mean, people are getting out of their car. You know how it happened, right? I mean, it's just people. Everybody's just knocking on people's. And I'm like, I was just like, I'm supposed to be here right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really, and at the hour and a half mark, I was getting a little antsy, but yeah. I really, I didn't make a phone call. I didn't complain. I didn't call 5 people and go, I can't believe it. I was just like, I'm just going to sit back. I'm lucky. I have I have water, and I have, I had a cold drink, in my thermos, and I'm like, hey, this is fine. We're just going to sit here. But it's amazing. And the politicians, and you can't go, it's one or the other. Like if you are a Republican, you're not going to dinner with Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you're not going to. It's gotten to the point in America at this point where it is really divided. Now, my wife and I, we're just like, I could go either side. Go out to dinner with anybody. Have a conversation about anything. Like I don't hey, if that floats your boat, and eventually you steer them down a conversation that's not political. You don't care, but you don't feed into it. And it hasn't always been that way. But I can tell you now, like just having that ability to not take it personally if someone says, your party is X. You're a moron if you like this party. People. I used to take that personally. Now I'm like, you're right. Like, whatever.
Yeah. I would want to argue about it in the past, but I couldn't actually give it the energy or the oxygen to argue about it now.
No.
I'm just going to look and see if there's anything else which was got a highlight in this. So since feeling good is usually associated with alignment, then so is courage. And the idea is to leverage these forces so they aid in your ability to move through fear with courage. So that's interesting as well. They're talking about a lot of kind of action-oriented stuff here.
It was. This is the first time, and I'm like, you're more experienced in this with Joshua, but this is the first time I've seen him talk a lot about taking, this uncomfortable action, which is, something that Tony Robbins says, Dean Grazioso says. It's, it's in the uncomfortable part is taking action through, to overcome fear, right? To do that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if you remove the outcome, the attachment to the outcome, there is no fear. It's it's like drinking
years
water.
ago there was that book which I never read, but I always thought the title was good, which is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Oh, I haven't read that one either. Yeah,
I never read it, but I just thought it was a great title. I can't remember the name of the woman who wrote it, but I thought, that's a really great idea, and it kind of fits with this. They say here, the future expanded version of you has taken action, and this resulted in the expansion of the belief system. Therefore, action itself alters beliefs. And I guess that's kind of true. Like we might say that outcome reinforced the action I took. So next time I would also take action. But it's interesting, this stuff.
This week, and I agree with you. This week, this reading and was even in my fog. I felt very attached to this expansion, this part. We really felt like it was something I needed to hear. Especially this whole concept of, taking that action, moving through fear, not caring about what the outcome is. And just that alone is the growth or the expansion that you need. That's it. Just do that, and see where it takes you. So there's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on here. There's all that stuff you were talking about, releasing attachment to any specific outcome and the transactional approach. The realization that fear is the natural byproduct of an inspired idea. So that's a key point, isn't it? That you get an inspired idea and fear will be there, is in and of itself very powerful indeed. When you know that fear is to be expected, you can analyze the fear. Is it a rational or an irrational fear? Will taking action lead to death or physical harm? So this is a key point that Joshua makes right from the beginning of boot camp, that a valid fear is one that could lead to your physical harm or death. And that's our survival instinct. But we've taken that further, and now we fear all sorts of things that will not harm us physically or kill us. And it's all in the mind because we imagine an outcome that doesn't exist. And we think, oh, well, if that happened, which is purely fantasy, then I would feel bad. And why would you feel bad? Oh, well, because of some limiting belief I have. So then you realize that most of the things we fear or have a negative view on, it's all in the mind, really, and you can choose a different thought. If so, which is the physical harm, it's a rational fear. If not, the fear is irrational. You can always act on any idea when the fear itself is irrational. You never have to worry about unwanted outcomes. Just take the action and move to the expanded place in a higher vibration. This is really powerful stuff. Like, I was kind of gobsmacked reading this stuff this week.
I like that a lot too. I do. And you know, that self-negative talk, that narrative that you get going on in your head, man, that momentum gets going, and it is tough to stop, but it is a choice. You're you know, it's really well said. You know, the things that we do that we don't do because of the fear of something that will probably never happen.
Yeah. So I look at my mother, who's a wonderful person. She is a worrier, and she thinks that her worries are all valid, and she thinks that she's noticing them, and she's kind of playing this protector role, and she completely lives with her worries and fears. And her brother, who I was talking about before, my uncle, and my grandfather, who I share a name with those two, they never worried about anything. And my grandfather, who was a simple working man, he was born in 1901, he's long gone, but he used to say to my mother, worry killed my mother, and it's not going to kill me. So he had some kind of an insight that worry was a choice, and I'm choosing not to do it.
That is awesome. And man, my parents, I think it's that generation too. My parents are both complete worriers about everything and anything. You know, it's my grandparents were the same way, and they live on worry. They literally live on worry.
Yeah, I occasionally say to Mum, it's a choice, but you know, she just writes it off like, well, you're just like, you know, my brother or you know, my father. Like, you know, you guys, this is how you're made. I'm made differently. So she thinks it's innate, right? Whereas she doesn't realize it's a choice. Because I did worry about stuff. She wouldn't have known that because I've always kind of had a upbeat demeanor, I think. But in the past, I did worry about stuff a lot more than I do now. Well, what I realized is that by thinking about the worry of the thing I don't want, I kept attracting more of it. And when I wanted something else, and I used to say this is like flying a helicopter, because, you know, if you've ever taken the controls on one of those, they're not intuitive like a little airplane. If you get in an airplane, you know, it does what you expect it to do. You know, you push forward and backwards to go up and down, and you go sideways and blah, blah. But in a helicopter, you got the stick, and it's like, well, what does this thing do? And it's not intuitive whatsoever. And if you're in a helicopter up in the sky and you pull the thing, you have no idea what's going to happen. And then you push the lever and it does what you want. It's like, oh, that's good. How did I do that? Like, how do I do that again? Like, what combination of controls was that? So that's how I used to feel about alignment and vibration and attracting what I do and do not want. It's like, okay, I can see I attracted a lot of stuff I don't want. I can see at other times I've attracted stuff I do want, but I have no idea how to get more of what I want and less of what I don't want. It's like the helicopter. It's like, damn, this thing doesn't work. Like, how do you fly this thing? And then I realized, oh, well, it's simply focus on the thing you do want. Don't think about the thing you don't want. Get back into alignment and raise your vibration. And it's that hard and that simple.
That's awesome. That is a great analogy, by the way. I love that. I love that. All right, listen, I got to jump on another little call.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
this was awesome, by the way. Thank you again, Rob, for setting these up and having these conversations. I really enjoy this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I'll see you same time, same place next week. But I've also got questions for Joshua, so I'll see you there tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to ask him a few questions too. I'm excited.
Okay.
See ya.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry.